Well, welcome to Sipping Sense, Sips and Swigs, a monthly edutainment podcast designed to introduce you to intriguing and unique people and innovations in the wine world. My name is Stephanie Brown, and I'm your host and author of Sipping Sense, Uncorking the Flavors of Wine, Entertaining, and Healthy Cooking. And today I have the pleasure of being able to speak with Angela McCrae from Napa Valley, California. Angela is a thought leader and creative strategist with over 20 years of experience in media, marketing, wine advocacy, diversity driven storytelling. As a founder of Uncorked and Cultured, she reimagines how the wine and luxury lifestyle industries connect with multicultural audiences through digital content, partnerships, and authentic narratives. Named the 2023 Wine Leader, Industry Leader by Wine Business Monthly, Angela also serves as the Executive Director of the Association of African American Vintners, also known as AAAV, leading initiatives like the Sip Consciously series and the AAAV Wine Symposium to foster inclusion and elevate emerging voices in wine. Welcome, Angela, and it's so good to have you here with me today.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm excited to be here with you today, and congratulations on the podcast.
Yeah, I get to talk to people like you every day. So that's very cool. All right. So tell me a little bit more about your career before wine, and then share with the audience that event or experience that sparked your interest in the wine industry.
Well, I have a multifaceted background in media. So, I started out being an audio engineer for local broadcast news. So, in my 20s, while I was still in my undergraduate at Morgan State University, I was literally learning media during the day in class, but actually working at a television station in the evenings. And I was hired to be the first audio engineer for their broadcast news, their morning news show at WBFF Fox 45 in Baltimore. And so that's where everything launched from there. And, I always saw myself, being this big audio engineer that was going to go on tour with all the hottest bands that I loved listening to growing up, until I realized, being out and doing live shows, live music shows, it's a lot of physical labor. And I remember being at they were setting up for a Roots concert at one of the local campuses. And I always would talk to the audio engineers. I would ask them questions. And someone told me, you don't want to do this, especially not, you're young. He was like, you don't want to do this. You want to have babies. He made like some type of comment. And, I was in my early 20s. I was an undergrad, so I didn't think anything of it, but it definitely deterred me from wanting to pursue a career, traveling around the world on tour with different music bands. So I stuck to the audio engineer, and I moved back to DC, got into cable news, government, live television. And then in 2008, I moved to LA, and I completely kind of changed into a different forte of media. And it was, after doing some volunteer kind of part-time work, teaching television production and running a summer youth program in DC, that I realized that production wasn't just where it was at. I did like teaching, engaging, and educating and connecting with people, because it could be isolating in an audio booth. So when I went to Los Angeles, I was working for a digital distribution company called Deluxe Digital Studios. And it was funny because this was when Netflix was still sending out, mailing out DVDs. Remember that?
Yeah, I do remember that.
So what my job was really taking those films in its original HD format, which a lot of times were on HD tape, and old catalog tapes, and literally converting them into files for Netflix, Amazon, Vudu, and Hulu. And so if I would have known what I know now about those platforms, I think I'd be a millionaire, because I would have invested heavy back in my 20s.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you.
So now I just, I got into wine. My first real introduction into wine was when I was at one of the major studios in Los Angeles that I worked at, NBC Universal. And I've planned a corporate retreat where we did, a train ride up to Santa Barbara. And it was a 1-day trip, and we did a 10-mile bike tour around St. Anise. And it was so beautiful. Like, it was peaceful. You got to eat the grapes off the vines, and it was my first true exposure. So after moving to New York, and leaving a job, a stint at the documentary film company and going to South Africa, I realized that this was a possibility, was
Wow.
being able to see it firsthand.
Yeah, yeah. So you talk about the experience in Santa Barbara, and the just the walking through a vineyard is just like, oh my God, could I live like this? And you just really get really excited. That's one of my wonderful experiences as well. And obviously, I talk about me loving wine and sitting down and seeing a flight of wine going, I don't even know what all these wines, all these grapes are, and going like, I need to learn more. So, but walking through the vineyard, I was hooked. It just
Yeah.
glad I was hooked. Okay, so you have done a lot in your young life. uh, uh
That's debatable.
yeah, no, well, there are so many people who are not used to getting up and moving and trying out new jobs and trying out new communities, meeting new friends all over again. And then creating that network for business. It's not easy for everybody. And maybe your media background is what, helped you get over, I call the fear of the fear of the unknown, just because you got a chance to see a lot of different things. But you've been able to create a pretty amazing reputation in a short space of time.
Oh,
So,
thank you.
tell me a little bit about how you navigated the wine industry so quickly.
Well, it's funny you should ask that. So with that little documentary film company that I worked for was very grassroots, and I was doing digital marketing and communication. So the whole job was to come up with ideas, figure out some cool ways to connect with audiences, while also partnering with existing institutions to really help to do a grassroots movement. So when I started Uncorked and Cultured in 2020, May of 2020, as a Facebook group, all I did was just use that same model, right? Connecting with social media groups, just really kind of seeing who liked wine and what was already out there. And literally in just 2 months, it grew to 800 people in a very short period of time. And I had just become a wine ambassador for a company based here in Napa, just really trying to educate my friends who were in a pandemic. We were all alone. We were drinking a lot, but have it be more fulfilling and more impactful. So introducing them to luxury wines from France, from Napa, teaching them how to drink wine, introducing them to sommeliers. And so I really took my film and television and community development experience and merged them together. So, you know, I would just host YouTube and Facebook videos introducing people to the wines that my friends and people were purchasing. But then most importantly, I started really leaning into culture because it was a lot of uncertainty and we needed something that was going to keep us hopeful and inspired. And so I started really focusing on that as a positive outlet over wine. And so after speaking to a few friends and colleagues and getting a lot of support, I decided that Uncorked and Cultured should be a media company and document what was happening, that ripple effect that was happening in 2020 and beyond, which it was first it was a Me Too movement in wine with that, New York Times expose, but then it was also a racial awakening happening in wine as well.
Right, right. Yeah, 2020 was a pivotal year for a lot of people, both in business and personally. And I like the idea, in my background, I have talent acquisition, and I will always tell people when they're looking for jobs and trying to figure out what's next for them, how you transfer skills. And you just talked completely about how you use the background you had in media, and television, and use those partnership skills in the wine industry. So that's pretty cool, and hopefully our listeners will think about that as they're thinking about whatever job they want next, because some people want to just completely change career paths, and sometimes you have to really sit down and really figure out, how do I map those skills from where I am today to where I want to go. So that's pretty cool.
And I'll just say something just to kind of for reference too, because of that television production background and everything was virtual, Zoom was just starting to hit the scene, all these different platforms. Because I knew television, which if you look at how we watch virtually, it's like a television show on our computer. I literally knew it. I knew how to keep people engaged. I knew how to add that production value. So I really was able to lean into creating virtual experiences and trade industry events, giving voice to people who wasn't getting voices in the larger mainstream wine community. So that was one of the most pivotal, most valuable uh, things that I did that was able to really put Uncorked and Cultured out there and for it to be respected, because I was bringing value to an industry and to a group of people that didn't understand or have access to the skills that I had, for next to nothing, because I wasn't charging for my service. I was doing it, as part of the movement, and
Right.
then figuring out ways to monetize it through sponsorships and ticket sales.
Right, right. Okay, so let's pivot. Let's pivot to the triple AV. Let's pivot to your internship and what you've learned with the industry, both on I call it on all sides. Because if you think about it, I know you work in kind of like that way high end, that you know area of wine where people go like, I'm going to spend XYZ number of dollars on a bottle of wine and I don't really care and I'm going to share it with whoever I want to share it with. Two folks who are just start, some of them just starting out in the industry as producers or winemakers, and they're over here trying to figure out how to just have somebody even know who they are, what their name is. So you've got like you see two sides of the picture every single day. And so talk a little bit about what it was like to learn from the inside at a really high-end wine organization, and how those skills are help you navigate other folks that are trying to figure that out. How do you give advice and be their advocates on the side where they have no idea how much
Right, right.
spend on trying to figure out how to have people pick that bottle off the shelf.
Yeah. So, I want to do it in a chronological way, because I think it's better for my brain to understand it, because that's how I actually was going through the learning journey. And I'll
Mhm.
say that my first introduction in the wine industry was a wine ambassador. So I was literally understanding the customer's needs, desires, and how they looked at wine, how they approach wine, starting with my friends and my community and my circle first. Then I started working at a local wine shop in Harlem called Pompette, where I then was looking at my community from a broad kind of like spectrum in Manhattan, where I was then able to instill that trust first time, build that relationship, but then also understand how the retail side works, right? How because they're, at the end of the day, that's that first point of entry for consumer, is the retail space.
Right.
And how you show up as a representing a brand or representing that space really says a lot about the comfort of the customer and how they're going to continue to look at wine.
Correct.
So I feel like that was super important to mention, right? Because a lot of times people's first impression when they go into a tasting or a wine shop, or even looking at a wine menu, a lot of times the people that are talking to them aren't educated or aren't interested in educating them or meeting them where they are.
Right.
So that right there is a disservice. So I just want to say that I learned that's a lesson that I would like to share with others, is be approachable and try to meet people where they are. And then going into the AAAV, role was really interesting, because, I was still on my wine journey. I didn't know wine business. I still didn't even know who all the members were. But one of the three things that I learned working at AAAV is the disparity between our members and the larger wine community that's been producing wine for 3 or 4 generations, right? And in between too, right? A lot of our members aren't from wine country. They're not from wine industry, and they're getting in as an outsider. And so that puts them at a huge deficit and disadvantage. So just understanding, like, and then now we're not even talking about, and that tariffs is a part of that, if you're importing. So it's just a lot to think about. And so the last thing I'll say about AAAV that also was super valuable is that I learned that the industry does, particularly on the retail and consumer side, they want to support. They want to support smaller, especially brands that remind them of themselves, that speak their language, that is connected to their identity. So that was when I realized that wine is very personal, and people have personal choices when they consume wine, but the industry, particularly on the retail side and consumer facing side, wants to support it. So we've gotten a lot of support from different sponsors over the years, that has really been either doubling down, or if not, just putting their toes in to see how they can support and sustain the Association of African American Vintners. So I'm super grateful for that. And I'll just say the final thing is that I also learned that moving out to Napa It's a completely different culture out here than anywhere I've ever lived. So there's been an adjustment, since I've been here as an apprentice.
Mhm.
Um, and
Right.
so, just thinking about that, right? When you think about moving to relocating to a new city, usually people look at how close is it to my family? Like, does it have the places I like to the comforts that I need? For me, I didn't look at any of it. I just literally applied for an apprenticeship program with the Verizon Project in Silver Oak and was like, I want to get out of New York. And I wanted to get my hands dirty, literally, because
Right. Right.
working in a tasting room, doing things virtually and being acknowledged, I felt like that imposter syndrome, like, coming in, because I'm like, well, I haven't even been in a vineyard doing anything. So this was a super pivotal moment for me to get my hands dirty and really understand what the nuances. And so the apprenticeship program took me across 6 different departments or, sides of it. So I was in the vineyard, literally 44, 45 years old, running around the vineyard, which was interesting. um, by myself sometimes, with
Yeah.
wildlife, in the middle of nowhere with no phone
Oh
service.
Lord, no, no, no wildlife for me. Thank you.
Oh yeah, I've had some, some run-ins or some, seeing some things run by, and then I went into the production where I actually got to help make the wine.
Right.
So I worked my first harvest in the Russian River, which is so beautiful in the morning with the fog. It's just like when you think about Terroir and you think about Sonoma and Napa and the microclimates, living here, you actually get to appreciate it and really truly understand it because you see it happening in real time.
Right, right, right. Yeah. The earth is an amazing thing, and the sun, and you put the sun with the earth, a lot of things happen with the two of those, and so it's people don't realize how much the viticultural piece of this industry um is prevalent, because most of the people that work at the wineries, and a lot of the folks that work on the at in in this business are farmers at the end of the day.
Oh.
And so I talk about, California used to be all vegetables and tobacco back in the day. And so, that's what actually all that growing in the earth is what changes how the grapes taste even today. So there's a lot to learn about the business of wine. And a lot of people see the I call the fun side, the pretty side, the exquisite side, but there's a lot that goes into making that bottle hit the table. So
Absolutely. And that was one of the cool things about the apprenticeship is it allowed me to follow that journey because after doing my harvest, I actually had a chance to go into customer care where that's where I really learned the difference between having a table wine or just having a brand. I mean, versus having a real brand, right? A nationally, if not internationally recognized brand and really hearing from the customers firsthand their excitement and their personal multi-generational connection to a brand, but then also just how much corporations invest in, in holiday gifting.
right,
And then from there, I went to marketing and just seeing the different partnerships. I got to do a digital marketing campaign for a social media video. And then I went to wholesale where I literally got to be in the room with the all 3 tiers where, representing the supplier, walking around with our distributor reps, and then being
right.
in the, in a wine shop or in a restaurant with the buyer. So that was really fun and interesting to kind of see that, kind of side of things. And then the final was when I got a chance to be into the tasting room. And that was just another high level touch point of hospitality and retail and just really understanding how to engage customers, but then also how to be a true steward of the brand, not just in talking points and understanding the story, the brand story, but literally engaging people and taking them on that journey with you and then resulting in.
Great, great, great. Well, Angela, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. It's been a pleasure. I learned a lot more about you that I didn't know. And that's always a good thing. And I know that we'll spend some time with you, even maybe this summer on the vineyard. But until then, stay well and good luck.
Thank you.